Hey everybody, welcome back. Let's talk about a question you may not even know you wanted to ask. And that is, did Keith Richards steal his style, his signature moves from the great guitarist Ry Cooder? Let's find out. All right, so I first heard of Ry Cooder when I was buying my Rolling Stones collection for the first time in the late 80s. I saw in the liner notes to Let It Bleed that he plays mandolin on Love in Vain. And he plays that amazing slide guitar part on Sister Morphine from Sticky Fingers. I didn't think too much about him after that until I encountered a quote by Rich Robinson of the Black Crowes. So this would have been 1990 or 1991, where he says that the rumor in the industry is that Ry Cooder plays the riff on Honky Tonk Women. A few years later, I'm taking guitar lessons, and completely unrelated to this topic, my guitar teacher says, "Oh, you've got to check out Ry Cooder, especially this album called Paradise and Lunch."
Had a friend Louis Brown, he was a deacon, just as wise as he could be. Now you realize he could read the good book back from Revelations down to Genesis. You know, lad.
Then I heard a Rolling Stones demo called Downtown Susie, and Ry Cooder plays on that track, and we hear these licks. Okay, fast forward to 2001, and I read this Stephen Davis book, Old Gods Almost Dead. And in it, I learned that Ry Cooder did have something to say about it. Was quite embittered, at least when he gave an interview to Rolling Stone magazine in the early 70s. He said that the Stones were bloodsuckers, a reptilian bunch of people. And he basically accused the band of stealing Honky Tonk Women from him. So I don't know how Ry Cooder still feels about this in 2020, but he most certainly has somebody who champions his point of view in two separate articles, one in June 1999 for Esquire magazine, and almost using the identical language in August 2011 in the New Yorker magazine. The essayist Alec Wilkinson says the following: "If you wonder what his sensibility sounds like when applied to rock and roll, one version of it anyway, the most widely known example I can think of comes from the period when Cooder had been hired to augment the Rolling Stones during the recording of Let It Bleed. He was playing by himself in the studio, goofing around with some changes, when Mick Jagger danced over and said, 'How do you do that? You tune the E string down to D, place your fingers there, and pull them off quickly. That's very good. Keith, perhaps you should see this.' And before long, the Rolling Stones were collecting royalties for Honky Tonk Women, which sounds precisely like a Ry Cooder song and absolutely nothing like any other song produced by the Rolling Stones in more than 40 years. According to Richards, in his recent autobiography, Cooder showed him the open G tuning, which became his mainstay and accounts for the full-bodied chordal declarations that characterize songs such as Gimme Shelter, Jumpin' Jack Flash, Start Me Up, and Brown Sugar. The most succinct way I can think of to describe the latticed style that Keith Richards says he has sought to achieve with Ron Wood is to say that for 35 years, the Stones have been trying to do with 4 hands what Cooder can do with 2. Now, don't get me wrong, I think Alec Wilkinson is a fine writer. I love the New Yorker magazine. I love Ry Cooder, but that passage is wildly overstated and wrong-headed. But let's first talk about what he gets right. Mick Jagger was in on this discovery, if you will, very early on. We know this from an interview he gave to Jan Wenner in 1995, saying that he wrote Brown Sugar in 1969 while he was on the set of the movie Ned Kelly, The Adventures of Ned Kelly, or whatever it was called. And there is circulating on YouTube this fantastic clip of Mick showing Ike and Tina Turner an embryonic version of the Brown Sugar chord progression backstage at Madison Square Garden in 1969. The notion that Keith was in the dark about all this and that Mick saw Ry Cooder playing and then presented Keith with this revelatory gift of the open G tuning. This notion is preposterous. Complicating this narrative is perhaps Keith's faulty memory. He says that Ry Cooder is the first person he saw play in open G. He acknowledges that. But the rock journalist and author Paul Trinka says that that is highly improbable. In his 2014 book, Brian Jones, The Making of the Rolling Stones, he notes that Brian Jones played in open G on Little Red Rooster. Keith and Brian lived practically on top of one another in that famous Edith Grove flat. So, according to Trinka, I think this is a pretty compelling case. Keith had to have seen open G tuning at some point before he met Ry Cooder. He just doesn't remember. And the first clue that we know that Wilkinson is wrong, and perhaps Ry Cooder is wrong about this, is in the list that Wilkinson includes of songs that characterize the Keith style. He included Jumpin' Jack Flash and Gimme Shelter on that list of open G songs. Those songs are not in open G. They're in open D or E. That's our first clue that we know Keith was doing Keith moves before he ever met Ry Cooder. Let's grab a guitar. So Jumpin' Jack Flash, not in open G tuning, but the original recording is in open D or E. Functionally, those tunings are identical. The intervals are the same tuning. So Keith had been experimenting in open D and E before Ry Cooder, and he was doing Keith things. This experimentation yielded many monumental Keith riffs, including Stray Cat Blues, Child of the Moon, the B-side of Jumpin' Jack Flash. And Gimme Shelter, not an open G. Street Fighting Man. So if he didn't get these ideas from Ry Cooder, these open D, E ideas, where did he get them from? Well, he tells us in his memoir, Life, that he first saw Don Everly of the Everly Brothers do it. Check this out.
Bye-bye, love. Bye-bye.
Not only can you hear Don Everly's influence on Keith in those clips, you can hear it on Jimmy Page. When the Levee Breaks is living inside Wake Up Little Susie. But there's still an ingredient missing. Those Everly Brothers moves are single fret barred chords. One of the essences of the Keith riff, or what we know as the Keith riff, is not just the bar, it's the sus, the suspension with his second and third fingers. And I'm not hearing that in the Everly Brothers. So where was Keith getting that? We hear it before the open tuning experiments. We hear it in standard tunings on these songs. All right, 19th Nervous Breakdown, 1966, has got a one-finger bar with a two-finger suspension. We can go back even further. We can go back literally to the beginning. All right, so those are one-fingered suspensions. I think, if I listen to it closely, I think he's just... just playing on the second string there, or the suspension is only on the second string. So this stuff clearly was in the air, and it certainly was inside of Keith. Let's listen to the man himself tell us who influenced him.
If you turn out to be a musician, anything you've ever heard comes out in what you play. We were influenced by Howling Wolf, Muddy Waters, Jimmy Reed, Chuck Berry, Little Richard.
This is seemingly comprehensive, but something is still missing. And that list that Keith mentions, and Nick in that documentary, those guys don't have the signature Keith riff. If we're talking about the Keith riff, Chuck Berry didn't play that way. And we know Keith stole everything he could from Chuck Berry. He told us that when he inducted Chuck Berry into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Chuck didn't play that way. Muddy didn't play that way. Howlin' Wolf didn't play that way. Hubert Sumlin didn't play that way. Jimmy Reed didn't do that. Well, we know the Stones were copying Jimmy Reed. We got The Spider and the Fly, 1965. So there's somebody missing from that list. I think the omission is unintentional, but there's a key figure missing here. And for that, we need to go to Atlantic City, New Jersey, my hometown, in December of 1980. About that clip, not least of which is that it took place in Atlantic City Convention Hall near where I grew up. But the best part, the reason I chose it is because you get to see Eric Clapton signaling to Keith with his head while John Lee Hooker is mugging with the audience. Eric Clapton's saying, "Check out our man." That is so cool. But let's listen to the original recording of Boogie Chillin'.
Yeah, my mama, she didn't love me. You had to stay out all night long. Oh, Lord.
Okay, that riff has got everything. The guts of everything we're talking about. The essence is present in that 1948 recording. It is a short hop from Boogie Chillin' to Start Me Up and all down the line. We're in open G, we're capoed, we're not using a slide, and it has the all-important suspension to the 4 chord. And if you notice, when John Lee Hooker's playing that, the 4 chord, he still has it sounds to me like he's still playing the C shape of standard tuning. I don't know if he did that just because it was an accident or he liked the sound of it. I have no idea. But the important thing is that he does this hammer-on move. And if you hear what's happening on the 5th string, I'm plucking with my thumb. I call this the slur. The important aspects of the Keith riff are, one is the sus and the other part is the slur. Okay, and we've got it here on the 5th string. 2 variations. Okay, you take that riff and you can very easily start playing all of our favorite Keith open G riffs. So where did John Lee Hooker get the idea to play an open G like that? I mean, it sounds to me like an adaptation of what Robert Johnson had played, but with a slide. The point is, this stuff gets passed on. If the Keith style is like a pot of gumbo, there's no denying that Ry Cooder added some important seasoning. But he did not write Honky Tonk Women. Keith Richards wrote Honky Tonk Women. And the reason that we can know this for sure is that Ry Cooder is still alive today. He recorded and performed for decades after Honky Tonk Women was released. And he didn't write Can't You Hear Me Knockin'? He didn't write All Down the Line or Silver Train or Start Me Up. He wrote none of those things. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is that Ry Cooder is not Keith Richards. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe and share and check out my other videos.